Friday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope your weekend is off to a good start. Browns in Seattle for tomorrow night's preseason finale. Before they hopped on the plane, they did go through a workout yesterday, closed to the media. Deshaun Watson reportedly took all of the reps that he was supposed to at quarterback. It brings up the question, do the Browns play Watson in that preseason finale against the Seattle Seahawks? Longtime Browns beat reporter Tony Grossi with his thoughts on the topic.
I still would play him. I think he needs to get in there and get reacclimated to the speed of the game. But, you know, the fact that Amari Cooper is probably not going to play, David Njoku is not going to play, the offense is not going to be whole, even if Watson plays. So that might be another factor that they just say, let's err on the side of caution.
With that, let's welcome in Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. So, Jeff, just your whole thoughts on that. And we're talking about this the night of the preseason finale. Your thoughts on Watson?
It's, look, there's two ways to obviously look at this. Would you like, knowing the fact that he hasn't taken his last snap since November, to at least just go in there, get his feet wet, just this, that way, all the newness, hopefully, of, whatever's going to happen to September 8th, is kind of out of the way. In the same respect, maybe it isn't something you need to necessarily worry about. But it is a good point. Everybody seems so fixated on whether or not, he plays in the preseason. Meanwhile, there's going to be several guys who probably have not played all the entire preseason and won't play in the entire preseason. We still have offensive tackles that haven't even returned to practice yet. So, if you think you're not putting him out there in the best situation to succeed or to stay healthy, then yeah, maybe you should err on the side of caution. It's also, you'd also have to find out, Seattle says they're playing everybody. Meanwhile, the Browns say they're playing everybody. And then we're going to get a list probably before the game starts of guys that aren't playing. So there's a lot that goes into it. What do I think he should probably go out there and play? Yes. I'm also not in his body. But, we've talked about this a lot of times, over the last few months, and everything, regarding Deshaun Watson, we basically take out the grade books and we start on September 8th. We're not going to take out the grade books and start on August 24th. It's all about Dallas. It's always been all about Dallas. So if it just turns out that we still have to wait now until Dallas, well, that's what it was all about anyway.
All right. I know you've addressed this on the Locked On Browns podcast. Offensive line has questions. When do you think you get answers?
My assumption would be, once you're done in Seattle, and, probably the first time we're going to hear from Coach Stefanski and anybody Browns related would probably be that Monday. We'd like to hopefully hear that, these guys are coming off the list and, getting to work. I mean, or even if it's Tuesday, because for these guys to come off the list, I'm pretty sure you have to start releasing some players. So that means if they're going to come off the physically unable to perform list, maybe Tuesday would be an actual day where you would do it because you're going to cut 37 players on Tuesday anyway. But yeah, I mean, Sunday is 2 weeks away. So you figure, these guys need at least, 1 week of just kind of getting somewhat back into football shape. And then the next week, which would be the amp up for Dallas, would be, putting in the game plan and hoping these guys are ready for it. But, it's hard to believe that these guys are going to go, 9 months or whatever it is since the last time they played football. Jack Conklin is going to be even longer than that. And then all of a sudden, they're just going to take the practice field on, Tuesday and be ready to go for a full 60 minutes on Sunday against a Dallas Cowboys team, which has got a pretty solid defensive line.
You look at it, and we were talking before, you mentioned Ifedi's a 9-year vet. So he's a guy that's played a lot in the league, has started. The other thing that we haven't talked about a little bit, so not Thursday, Wednesday, Jack Conklin was taking reps, not with the team, but as a potential left tackle. So the plan might be if Wills is not ready to go and Conklin is, Conklin played left tackle earlier this year. When we suggested that a little bit a couple weeks ago, people were rolling their eyes, but you got to find something that you're comfortable with.
Whatever it's going to be is you're going to try to find the pairing of your 5 best offensive linemen. That is exactly what you're going to try to do. I know people keep trying to bring up that, well, can Joel go to and look, it's really difficult to take a guy at Joel's age and say, hey, can you go out there, even if it's a game or 2 games, whatever. Jack, who knows? Maybe it's part of his routine. Maybe it's kind of always been a part of his routine. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Who knows? Are you saying that he's going to play left tackle for the opener? Are you saying that maybe, he's not the starter at right? Maybe he's the swing tackle because you do have an emerging talent in DeJuan Jones at right tackle. You got to have everything ready to go here. And, you feel bad, honestly, for Coach Andy Dickerson because, whatever is going to happen week one, and say if it doesn't go well in regards to the offensive line, in regards of, whoever plays, all of a sudden he's going to be under the microscope right away. And that was going to happen most likely replacing a guy like Bill Callahan. But, it's kind of difficult, when you're asking the guy to, make a great meal and, you're half handing him some, Kraft singles and some stale old white bread. But this offensive line, one way or another, needs to get better, and we need some of the better talent out there and contributing. And it's such an odd topic to talk about because for the first 4 years of the Barry Stefanski regime, the one area of this team you really never had any concerns about was the offensive line.
Yeah, and now, you're going to have to figure it out until everybody gets back, and hopefully everybody gets back and is healthy sooner rather than later. This is kind of interesting as well. This is from PFF Browns. They tweet out, Zach Zinter, preseason, 80.4 pass blocking grade, 48 pass blocking snaps, 0 pressures allowed. And the reason that's interesting is, Jeff, they didn't ask him to pass block in Michigan because they were too busy running over people. I liked the pick when they made it. The more I see of him, the more I like of him because he's a guy that if you need him, he will knock people off the line of scrimmage.
And the Browns were also smart. Him and his fellow rookie undrafted free agent offensive lineman, Javian Cohen, who also plays the guard position. They had him alternate a little bit. So, each one of them got the taste of the other guard position. There's nobody set in stone as to what either's future position is going to be. And I actually tweeted out yesterday, Michael Dunn hasn't done anything this summer. He's another guy that's just, on pump list. He is not participating as well. It's not a lot of money, but there's some guaranteed money in there, and it's over $1 million to Michael Dunn this year. But you have two young guys who could possibly be the future guards of the Cleveland Browns. So, are you going to muddy the waters by risking maybe moving on from Cohen and not finding a way to get him back to a practice squad, to keep Michael Dunn? But the growth you see from Zinter, and look, there were a lot of people that said, Zach Zinter probably deserved to get drafted higher than he was. There were two things obviously working against him. One was offensive guards just don't generally go that high. The other thing is that, Zach Zinter got hurt in the Ohio State-Michigan game last year, was not a part of the playoffs, so didn't have a chance to build his resume that way. Didn't do much during the draft process, so there wasn't much he could do to improve his stock that way. A lot of people were really confident the Browns got a solid player here, and to this point, it looks like they did. The run game, and it's, they obviously, highlighted the positive there by the pass blocking. The run blocking has not been there yet, but look, run blocking is supposed to work in unison. So if 3 guys aren't getting it done, 4 guys aren't getting it done, it's highly unlikely that the 5th guy is getting it done as well. But you see that, there's some possible future to this, interior of the Browns offensive line, which has been really good for a really long time. And you do have to face the fact that one day Joe Bitonio's career is going to be over. Wyatt Teller, if money gets tight, Wyatt Teller could be a guy that, the Browns maybe choose to move on from. But, once that happens either way and, Zach Zinter becomes a guy that's probably going to move into a starting lineup one day, the Browns are going to get some massive, massive cap relief because both their guards make a good amount of money, and you're going to have Zach Zinter, a 3rd-round pick on a rookie contract.
All right. The subject of the run game, which has struggled without question, is the topic. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I'm listening to you guys talk about how the Browns can run the ball better. First off, I heard they don't practice it very much. Second off, you're showing everybody else doing this in-motion stuff and the running and stuff. We don't do anything like that. We don't throw the ball to get the guy to open things up. If you ever watch our team, there's 900 guys on the line of scrimmage because we never throw the ball deep, and it's all because that's what Stefanski wants to run. We always run 2 tight ends. I'm not an offensive coordinator. I'm not saying that I am, but I think if you open the field up, you'll back these guys up, you might be able to run a little bit more. And putting the guy in motion wouldn't hurt. But bottom line is, guys, you are saying what you're saying, but it stops with Stefanski. Let's see what he does. Take care, guys. Thanks.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. We're talking about what the offense is evolving into. So the reason we're showing other teams is that's where the coordinators who are now working on the Browns offense came from. So that's what we are expecting to see. Could we be wrong? Sure.
Well, there's also some factors here. Last weekend you didn't see Deshaun Watson, you didn't see Amari Cooper, you didn't see Elijah Moore, you didn't see Jerry Jeudy, you didn't see Cedric Tillman. And you didn't see David Njoku. So you're playing without your top 5, ball catching targets, and without your quarterback. And as far as picking on Stefanski for this, the Browns have run the ball pretty damn well through the first 4 years of the Kevin Stefanski regime. But when you're missing guys on the offensive line, when you're playing these preseason games without your top-notch skill players, it's kind of hard to grade that, because basically you can't give it a grade. It's an incomplete because you're not seeing technically what you need to see. I will give him the credit of the one thing as far as the practices, you don't really do a lot of run game in practices or training camp. It is a very high area of players getting injured. So there's a reason it's not really done so much in training camp, because the last thing you want to do is have 10, 11, 12 guys all trenched into space together. That's how somebody's leg gets stepped on. That's how somebody's knee gets bent over. And it's an injury. Most of the run work you do in training camp or in practices is done on air. There's a reason for that. It's player safety. It's, basically protecting your assets. But even Jerome Ford, for as high as that number was last year of 0-yard runs or negative runs that resulted in negative yardage, he was still over 4 yards a carry. And look, I'm not worried about the run game. I'm worried about getting everything on the field, my offensive lineman, my quarterback, my skill players, and certainly number 24. The Browns have always been able to run the ball under this regime. So until I see, a month's worth of it being an issue, for me, it's not an issue.
Yeah, and again, it's a work in progress. So we'll see. We could be wrong. I could be wrong. They could do what they were going to do. I think the problem is you got to play to your quarterback's strengths, and I think they're trying to do that. Couple of notes the last couple of days relative to roster movement. Browns signed Lucas Haversick. That's a young kicker who was with them before in the offseason too. They did that when they traded Cade York, and Dustin Hopkins dealing with a minor injury, so Haversick will probably be kicking in Seattle. The Browns signed Jacob Salyers. That's a running back with Pierre Strong getting the injury. They terminated the contract of Giovanni Ricci. I'm a little surprised by that. They also announced that trade that I alluded to earlier. Cade York goes to the Commanders for a conditional 7th-round pick in 2025. Cade York wasn't going to be on the roster, so to get a 7th-round pick for him, okay, you got asset. It's going to be, Jeff. What's going to be interesting is the Browns have some assets. They could very well make some trades as we get into next Tuesday, 4 o'clock trade or cut down deadline time.
Well, and this is another one. Look, it could be player for player. That could be an instance that we could see here. The Browns definitely have players that, if they put on waivers, are going to be scooped up right away. So you definitely want to be able to play that and, keep adding draft assets. The Browns will fully be able to participate in the 2025 draft already. I think it's now probably up to 10 picks. I think they lost one, but did add one. So 10 or 11 for 2025. So you're back in the game there. For Cade York, look, you just feel good. The whole thing, and we talked about this when he was a rookie, don't put the game in the hands of Cade York. Don't put the game on the shoulder of Jacoby Brissett. And every week, the game was on the shoulders of Jacoby Brissett, trying to get the ball close enough to hopefully Cade York could kick a 60-yard field goal to bail them all out. And obviously, they didn't do anything for either guy. So for Cade, you're really, really excited. But it is funny, though. You notice nobody's up in arms, because the kicker hasn't attempted to kick the entire preseason. So nobody's talking about the fact that Hopkins hasn't done anything preseason. But, some of these things seem to get a free pass. Some of them don't. But for York, it's a nice story. And, obviously, as much as everybody's happy for him, it's either week 3, week 4, everybody's going to be rooting against him when they do play the Commanders.
Without question. Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. And I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, dough, Skrilla, chips, bread, and mo. 2, 5, 10, and 20. 30 big ones. Games aplenty. Cheddar, butter, lewd, and scratch. Find the letters, make a match, cause there's many words for cash, no doubt, and many ways to play a cash word. Check 'em out. Cash word from Ohio Lottery. It's game time, yo. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions in prizes, don't you know?
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, guys. Injuries seem to be the story of this preseason so far. The number of offensive tackles that got hurt last year was unbelievable. Could one of the perks, having hired Ken Dorsey and adding a quicker passing game, be beneficial to avoiding injury for players in the long run? I thought I saw a graph where Deshaun Watson was holding the ball over 3 seconds on pass plays last year, one of the longest in the league. If he can reduce that time, that means less time the O-line has to hold up, reducing risk of injury. Or is that a stretch? Watson would likely take less hits in the pocket also. Let's go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Jeff, Watson holds the ball long because he's waiting for things to develop and he's trying to make big plays a lot of times. At least that's been his history. There's also this narrative with Browns fans because he's been injured when he's been here. He really is not an injury-prone, quote-unquote, injury-prone quarterback. So he was durable until the last couple of years.
Well, I mean, it wasn't even, the first year he was here, he was just suspended for 11 games
Right.
and he finished out the string and played the last 6. Last year, certainly, it was a variety of injuries, but even, the broken shoulder was really kind of like a fluke thing. And when it first diagnosed, he honestly thought, can I take a shot every Sunday and play through it? Until they tried to explain to him they were not going to take that risk. And what was it, an ACL his rookie year? But no, I mean, look, the 3 seconds, that's a legitimate point. He does hold the ball that long. But this is the reason you keep investing into this wide receiver room. This is the reason you have, you made the move to bring in Amari Cooper. This is the reason you made the move to bring in Jerry Jeudy. This is the reason you brought in a former second-round draft choice in Elijah Moore. This is the reason you brought in you made a third-round selection on Cedric Tillman. There's a reason you made a third-round selection on David Bell. There's a reason you made the selection on Jamar Threat. You're trying to get as many guys on the field who you think are good enough and can get open quickly. So, it hopefully gives the opportunity for Deshaun to process as quickly as possible and get the ball out of his hands. All of these guys have great run after the catch ability. And that is another thing you're trying to push the envelope here on. You're trying to get the ball out of Deshaun's hand as fast as possible because you have legit playmakers at the receiver positions and you let them go out and you let them do their thing. The plan, you're going to do a little everything. You certainly want to throw deep because it opens up things underneath for the shorter passing game. It opens up things underneath for the running game. There's a lot to it, and it is. And, and I think that's why, probably another reason why a lot of people are hoping that Deshaun does at least take a couple of preseason reps because there is a lot of newness to this offensive system for the Browns here in 2024.
All right, Shelby Harris is a guy that re-signed with the Browns. He talked about why he did that as well as the chemistry of this defensive line.
One of the allures of coming back to Cleveland was being able to play with these guys and this defense and have Jim Schwartz be your D coordinator. But then also, when they went and brought Jockin, Coach Jockin, it was to have just such a talented D-line coach and have a talented D-line, it's only going to go up from here. You saw what he did with the, obviously Houston had some good players where he was at, but then he just helps elevate them, and that's all you want as a player is have a coach that can come elevate you.
How has Jacques kind of changed the tone in that?
Man, we just we be joking on each other, be having a good time, but it's it's loose but then when we come out here, we know when it's time to work, and I think having that balance of being able to be loose and going to work is delicate, and you have to, and it really uplifts everybody, because we know we're gonna have a good time, and then we all enjoy each other. It's a great chemistry in the room, and it's only up from here.
And the one area of the team that's played pretty well, minus the run defense, has been the defensive line. The defensive line has been getting after it, and they haven't played anybody either. You've got guys that aren't going to be on the team who were getting after it on that defensive line.
Yeah, most everybody who's had a sack to this point is somebody that's probably not going to make the final 53. But you saw this. I mean, Shelby Harris, basically isn't just saying stuff, to sound like he's saying stuff. You saw times on the sidelines last year, guys sitting on the bench. And for once in Myles Garrett's career, he just wasn't the dominant personality. You saw times where Myles was just sitting on the bench laughing at his teammates, laughing with his teammates. And so the camaraderie and the fact that these guys get along, it's not lip service. It's not blowing smoke up anywhere. It's the truth. And good organizations, this happens more often than not. A group becomes a unit, they become tight, and guys don't want to change. If the money is not that drastic different, a lot of guys would rather stay where they are. They're comfortable, friends, family, this, that. There's a million factors of why they would want to stay. But there's no joke about it. We all saw the way the Browns defense played last year. Celebrating almost after every stop. These guys just had an absolute blast with each other. And I'm sure there is a big, big belief within that room, the whole entire defensive side, that, between Jim Schwartz and all this talent that came back, that maybe, year one, that was great. But, the year two expectation should be even higher than it was year one, because you're a lot more comfortable with each other. You're a lot more comfortable with what's being asked of you. And, coach probably, has now developed a good amount of faith in, most of his top 15, 16 defenders, that he's going to let these guys just go out there and do their thing.
All right, so this one's from the Bleacher Report. One player on each NFL team that should be cut before the 2024 season. For the Browns, they go Tyler Huntley. Ideal situation, Browns find a trade partner for Huntley. He has legitimate value as backup quarterback, will undoubtedly catch on somewhere if available. Issue is Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston are locks. DTR remains an intriguing talent in Cleveland. Won't roster 4 quarterbacks. It's Huntley or DTR. One of them will be gone. So the question that I posed earlier in the week, I'm curious to your answer. If you're the Browns, you have to win one game late in the year to make the playoffs. Jameis Winston isn't available. Deshaun Watson isn't available. Who are you more comfortable with to go out and have to win a game with? Tyler Huntley or Dorian Thompson-Robinson? I did that when I asked the question before too. Dorian Thompson-Robinson or Huntley?
For me, it's easy. It's DTR. Look, DTR looks like he's playing within a flow of offense. It looks like he's playing on schedule. Tyler Huntley, through what we've seen through the first 2 preseason games, he's kind of just trying to play on athletic ability. And, he rushed a ball in the red zone that led to an interception. Everyone's trying to give him credit for chasing the ball carrier 60 yards down the field. Well, don't throw the interception. You don't have to chase the guy 60 yards down the field. You don't have to have a left tackle blow his knee out while trying to chase him down as well. It should be DTR. It's just that simple. I don't, and even when the possible trade talks came up this week with DTR, there's a couple thoughts you could maybe have. Is A, maybe the Browns feel they might have to keep an extra lineman for the first couple of weeks, just because of the injury situation that's there. So maybe, or are other teams coming and inquiring about DTR? Because look, the quarterback play, we hear about the starters. Not everybody's sitting around going in depth about who's behind said team's starting quarterback. So there could be teams that value DTR and think that, their situation isn't great this year, but maybe he is a guy that they would like to take some snaps for them. But yeah, if it's DTR versus Huntley, for me, there's no question it's DTR. The other thing would be is if you are thinking about possibly moving DTR with all the draft assets you have in 2025, maybe you're looking to reset the clock as far as, a younger, cheaper rookie quarterback. Dorian will be on year 3, getting close to, where his time would be done. But I think the competition for me this summer, I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson has been probably closer to completing for the backup quarterback job, which he was not going to win, than there was ever a competition between DTR and Tyler Huntley.
See, I would disagree. If I have to win a game this year, I've seen Huntley do it during the regular season. Thompson-Robinson was okay. And I know he's played well in preseason. I'm concerned when he faces teams that are game planning against him. So, I get it. They threw him in before he was ready last year. The other thing I would say, I think Huntley, and I keep going back to Dorsey with the guy in Buffalo, and I'm drawing a blank on his name.
Josh Allen.
Big kid, Josh Allen. They use him as a runner effectively near the goal line, and I think you could have a package with Huntley that mimics that a little bit.
Dave, you can't put Tyler Huntley and Josh Allen in the couldn't remember his name. You can't put those two games. Other than the fact both of them play quarterback.
They
in the
run.
NFL,
They run well.
I just don't see it. And look, anything to this point, And, you got to keep in mind, DTR is out there doing it with nothing. He's not throwing the top receivers, so at least he's getting some completions. He's moving the ball through the air. It's hard to believe, you can't make the excuse, that, one or the other is playing with the better players, because neither one of them are playing with the top talent. It's a stretch to say, DTR is going to go win a road game in Baltimore with the season on the line. But I think it's just as much a stretch to say Tyler Huntley is going to do the same. My honest belief is the Browns are hoping that somebody's going to come calling with any sort of day 3 pick for Tyler Huntley. And then they'll just keep their 3. And, I'm sure they'll add a practice squad quarterback. But that's probably the way that's going to work out.
Yeah. I mean, again, if one is willing, I don't know that they have a huge difference in the way they're grading either of them. If somebody gives them if one of them's a higher asset, the other one ends up being the one that is your. We're talking about the third quarterback. It's a guy that if we're playing him in a regular season game that means something, season's going down the road that it went down a year ago.
They already won that scratch off last year. They're not going to play that. They're not playing that again now.
Jeff Lloyd and I are going to take one more time out. Other side of the break, Bill Barnwell talking about the Browns' playoff chances from ESPN. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. This is from Bill Barnwell, ESPN's NFL Live, why he doesn't believe the Browns will return to the NFL playoffs this year.
Deshaun Watson may improve this year, certainly, but last year he was outplayed by Joe Flacco, who was on the couch for most of the year before Deshaun Watson was injured and he had to come in. He was better than Watson on a snap-by-snap basis, and although the Browns had a good record with Watson at quarterback, that was because the defense was playing out of its mind. It was allowing 1 point per drive, which would make them like basically the 85 Bears, and that's just tough to keep up year after year. Flacco's now gone. Bill Callahan, their excellent offensive line coach, is left for Tennessee, where he's going to coach under his son Brian. There is not a lot of offensive pieces to be excited about here.
So the thing that I don't quite understand in his rationale was the defense was better for Deshaun Watson, but it wasn't better for Joe Flacco. I don't think he thought that one through completely. It was the same defense. The defense was the reason they won with both of them. Now, relative to the comparison, I got interested and said, let's call up what each of them did. And it's pretty similar. Flacco threw for almost twice as many touchdowns. He also threw for twice as many interceptions. Watson's completion percentage was higher. They were also playing significantly better teams. Flacco beat the Jets with Simeon. He beat the Texans without C.J. Stroud. He beat the Bears. So, Jeff, this whole narrative that I'm bringing it up because I'm tired of hearing it, that Joe Flacco played so well. He played pretty well. There were positives and minuses to what Flacco did.
Well, and this is the thing, because, you basically can't, put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak. But did you think Deshaun Watson wasn't capable of winning in those games that Joe Flacco won? Like, that's the part that kind of like really, blows my mind. I mean, you look at Joe came with a very consistent vertical game, which, certainly helped. And I think that is one thing that where for all the time throughout the Stefanski regime, they finally just said, let's let him go and just let him rip it. Well, there's been quarterbacks here before. Baker Mayfield's got a great deep arm. Deshaun Watson certainly has shown the ability through his career to throw the ball deep. Jacoby Brissett is a great deep ball thrower. It just seemed that they really gave that opportunity to do it with Joe. And, it did work out. But look, the completion percentage was lower. Like you said, I think it was like 30-something more passes that Flacco threw than Deshaun, but also that was 4 more interceptions and 30 passes more thrown. Look, it's Deshaun is probably the most polarizing player in the entire NFL right now. And, the only way to silence it is to go out there and put up a year like he did, when he was playing for the Houston Texans. And if he doesn't do that, people are certainly going to question it. But they talk about this stuff, and like nobody talks about anything else. Like, well, what's going to stop them? Pittsburgh, they've going into preseason game 3, and neither one of these guys has distinguished themselves even close to being remotely a starter. Baltimore definitely got issues on the defensive side of the ball. Cincinnati, yeah, the offense kind of looks like it's going to be all right, but they got some offensive line questions. They certainly have questions on the defensive side of the ball. So, like, you just pick one team and you point out negatives, but you got to remember they're playing against specifically 16 other teams within the AFC. How do they fare amongst those 16 teams? So if you're telling me you don't see them as one of the 7th best teams in the AFC, then yeah, I seriously got an issue with that.
Yeah, and again, the people want to downplay. Well, look at the touchdowns. He threw 13. With a dominant defense, the one thing you can't do is turn the damn ball over. And he did it twice as much as Watson. So let that sink in before you tell me.
And what happened in the playoff game?
2 pick sixes on back-to-back plays, which has never happened in an NFL playoff game before. All right, 5 things to watch as the Browns close out the preseason against the Seahawks. This from Browns Wire. Will Deshaun Watson play? Number 2, needing more out of the run game. Number 3, Zaire Mitchell-Payton's quest for a spot on the 53-man roster. The offensive line is number 4. And let those young linebackers shine once more. I'm curious about the run game, and again, it's hard to figure that out because you haven't had the same guys playing together. You're kind of rotating guys in and out. You're switching positions, and that's it's a tweaked system as well.
Well, the thing is also going to be, though, I mean, what part, who exactly are you looking for to shine in the run game? Because the second, Joel Bitonio, Ethan Posick, Wyatt Teller, DeJuan Jones leave the field, and I'm assuming Jermaine Irfidi at left tackle, once those 5 guys leave the field, any running back playing after that is not going to be a running back that's going to be on the Browns 53. Dante Foreman, Jerome Ford, they will play behind that offensive line. But once that offensive line exits, so will those 2, which means the running backs playing after that are going to be the rookie undrafted free agent out of BYU and most likely Sailors who you just brought in. Obviously that Nick Chubb's not playing. We know that Naheem Hines is not playing. We know Foreman is going to make the roster. We know Ford is going to make the roster. So once those guys play, and even still, you don't know what the game plan is going to be. And if I'm putting in a new offense, maybe they're going to throw the ball more. So, I mean, and what exactly is, because if the starters play, 10 plays, maybe they run 4. What does it got to be? Is it got to be 4 carries for 25 yards or it's not good enough or more? It's like so subjected to put stuff out there like that. What you saw last week, Dante Foreman succeeded as a running back in the passing game, which impressed me. He was better than I thought, honestly. And I think that's going to be a big asset for them. We know Jerome Ford can do that. I think we do get caught up in this. The Browns may not run the ball as much as we're accustomed to till you see number 24 back. But again, and we've talked about this 100 times, last year was going to be the year where this team started throwing the ball more with Deshaun Watson. That was the whole point of making that move, was elevating the offense, all of these things. So this, progression was always going to happen. So, they're going to be a team that most likely is going to throw the ball first. Yes, they're going to now throw to set up the run as opposed to years past where they ran to set up the throw. But, it's hard to say what the gauge part is. But, yeah, I mean, would I like better than, 2.8 yards per carry? Sure. But, if it's only 4 carries among guys who are going to play against Dallas behind the top offensive line, then there's not really much to hang your hat on.
All right. Before I let you go, what do you think are the most intriguing roster battles as cutdown day is Tuesday at 4:00?
I would say Michael Dunn versus the 2 rookies is probably something I'm looking at, and it's probably really only something that I've looked at probably over the last week. Because these guys are going out there, they're getting it done. Plus, you're a guy like Andy Dickerson. You don't have much of a relationship with Michael Dunn, but these guys are maybe going to be your future. They're going to be your boys. So certainly you're pushing that there. I think wide receiver, you're done. I think running back, I think you're done. I think quarterback, we're done. Do they have 3 tight ends to keep? Do they maybe keep, Zaire Mitchell-Payton? Possibly. We know the 5 DNs are going to keep. We know the 5 D tackles are most likely going to keep. Linebacker, it kind of comes down to Devin Bush, Mahmoud Diabate, Tony Fields. All those guys are battling for linebacker 3, 4, 5. We'll see how it works out there. D'Anthony Bell, I think, is in kind of a tough spot. He hasn't done anything all summer. He's going to be 28 in October. So, whatever he is at this point is all he's ever going to be. Plus everybody, he's a core special teamer. Yeah, but does that count now? Because we've kind of changed the way special teams are being done. So guys that have hung their hat for years playing special teams, this really isn't the same system anymore. So those are some of the ones that I'm looking at. Probably the way it's going to work in linebacker, probably that 5th, 6th cornerback battle. Are they going to keep the actual corners? Are they going to keep a guy like Hardy or Tony Brown, who are probably predominantly special teams guys? Those are the last battles to be had, unless, the Browns don't get some guys back from injury, and which opens up a whole other point, Pandora's box.
Jeff Lloyd from the Locked On Browns podcast. It's always great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jeff.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Dave. Have a great weekend.
Jeff Lloyd, make sure you check him out. Locked On Browns podcast, always good Browns coverage. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Dalton Wasserman from PFF straight ahead. Stay with us on Sports4CLE. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I don't understand why the media and other Browns fans are trying to pressure Deshaun Watson to play for the final preseason game. In my honest opinion, the injury bug has not left us since early 2024 when we were in the playoffs. I don't think that we should put him in the preseason game because the tackle position, he can get hurt, something could happen, and y'all will be like, well, we told you shouldn't. Like, they'll try to flip it to make it seem like it was their idea to start him. But in my honest opinion, I just say Deshaun Watson sits, waits till week 1, and we go from there. Especially coming off that shoulder injury, I do not want to risk the Brown season in the preseason when it doesn't matter. I would rather go into the season him fully healthy and ready to go.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Dalton Wasserman, PFF data analyst, also the co-host PFF College Football Show. Dalton, I completely understand that line of thinking, and I kind of agree with it. They said that Watson was going to play. Then you lose 3 tackles in the second preseason game. Your first 2 tackles haven't played. Your first 2+ tackles haven't played much. Man, I'm kind of with you. I don't know that I'd do that. I mean, your thoughts on playing a guy when the offensive line is beat up?
Yeah, I agree. Look, I think there's a heavy part of every season. Honestly, it's just some of the healthiest teams make it to the postseason, even as opposed to some of the best teams, right? And I think for a team like the Browns, I know last year they made it with playing 4 or 5 different quarterbacks, P.J. Walker and Joe Flacco and DTR and those guys. But your franchise hinges on Watson, right? And that's playing 4 quarterbacks in a season is not a sustainable way to live. And you would rather, instead of him getting 10 or 12 reps in a meaningless game in the preseason 2 weeks before the season, let's just get him healthy. The shoulder appears to be fine from what they've been saying in practice. I'm with it. I think the vast majority of teams are not playing their starters in the final preseason game. Anthony Richardson for the Colts did this week, and he's coming off a shoulder surgery, but he's a young kid who needs reps, right? By now, Deshaun Watson should understand the NFL game. he should be smart enough to know the playbook by now. He's already been in it for a couple of years, and he just has to improve as the game reps and practices get going. I don't see a reason to play him in week 3 of the preseason.
Yeah, the only way I would do it is if he says, I really want to go and play a couple of series. And if he says he doesn't, I wouldn't play him either. This is interesting as well. 33team.com, so former NFL executives, power rankings for each team's running back room. They go 49ers 1, Lions 2, Dolphins 3. Then in the middle of the pack, Jaguars 15, Saints 16, and Browns 17. Browns arguably the hardest team to rank on this list due to Nick Chubb's health. If he were fully healthy, Browns would easily be inside the top 5. Deontay Foreman, Jerome Ford are capable runners. Look for Foreman to be the lead back, with Chubb likely out for the first month of the season, and Ford to provide some speed and juice. The other thing that makes it kind of tough is you don't know who your tackles are. The run game, is dependent on that. We've already talked about, is Jedrick Wills going to be ready? Is Jack Conklin going to be ready? There are a lot of questions, and you need some answers pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think if you isolate that ranking to the running backs alone, I think it's perfectly reasonable considering the injury that Nick Chubb is coming off of. It's not some sort of sprain. It's not just an ACL tear. That was an awful injury that you hope he recovers fully from because he's such a great player. And the second time that he's had to deal with it, you remember he had to do it once before back in Georgia. So I completely understand the question marks regarding it. They would certainly, if Chubb was healthy, be in at least the top 6 or 7. And you make a good point about the tackles too, where, this offense is about running off tackles, about getting that outside zone scheme going, much like a Kyle Shanahan or a Sean McVay, right? And on the interior, they're solid, right? You still have 2 great guards in Teller, Wyatt Teller inside. You've got Ethan Posich at center. They've got a really good interior. The tackles are a question. But as far as the backs go, look, I think it hit the nail on the head with Jerome Ford and Deontay Foreman being capable guys who can get you that 4 yards of carry. But Nick Chubb's health is really the X factor in all of it.
Yeah, Foreman's a guy that, he had the injury early in camp, has come back, played pretty well. When he's healthy, capable's really good. It seems like teams don't – if you give him 16 carries, there's a stat. 16 carries equals like 82 or 83 yards. That's really good production.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, capable backs can succeed behind a really good offensive line. And so that always gives you the floor for your running game. There's several teams in the league who have great running backs, but not a sufficient enough offensive line to give them that production. I think we saw something like that with Saquon Barkley and the Giants last year, where you go, we know Saquon's good, but man, they just don't block anybody. Or Travis Etienne with the Jaguars. The Browns never have that problem. So I have no doubts that Ford and Foreman can produce to some extent. It's just that Nick Chubb gives you that extra dimension, right, of making people miss and making big runs and grinding through for first downs. He's a special player when he's healthy, right? And I think that's what you hope for in your starting back and your superstar back, is that he's special, and hopefully he's healthy enough to still be special.
And you know what? They haven't said much about him, so it'll be interesting next week when you find out. If he's on the PUP list, it's one thing. If he's not, that means he's closer. He's going to play sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. You would hope so, that he doesn't miss more than maybe a couple of weeks, or I would be surprised if he's ready by week 1 with the way that injury was. But look, in maybe the most physical division, maybe the toughest division in football, it's always a theme with, when you talk about especially the Steelers and the Ravens and even some other physical teams in the AFC, you have to be able to run the ball. You have to be able to have that balance. You have to be able to grind through, obviously, cold weather games in Cleveland. And it's kind of how their team is built, right, with defense and winning low-scoring games and running the ball, despite having Deshaun Watson in there. But they're still built around the defense and the running game, and Chubb has to be a huge part of that, hopefully sooner than later.
So this one's from ESPN, ranking the NFL's best coaching staffs for 2024. And they look at the head coach and then the coordinators as well. So 1, they have the Chiefs, which is Andy Reid, Matt Nagy, Steve Spagnuolo. 2, Dan Campbell, Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn. That's kind of high for a team. I know they were in the NFC Championship game. Can they do it again? 3, they got the Rams, McVay, Mike LaFleur, Chris Shula. They got the Niners, the Ravens, the Texans, which is another one. They had a really good first year. Can they repeat it? Packers, the Vikings at 10. Then they've got the Colts with Shane Steichen, Jim Bob Cooter, and Gus Bradley. All right. They got Sean McDermott, Joe Brady, Bob Babich of the Bills, 12. And then they got the Browns 13 with Stefanski, Dorsey, and Jim Schwartz. Their rationale, I'm not sold on the offensive changes Stefanski has deployed over the past couple of seasons. Got his first coach of the year, resuscitating Baker Mayfield's career, using heavy personnel, big rollouts, play action since then. Browns have increasingly become a spread and shotgun team. Stefanski gets credit for working around bad quarterbacks to keep the offense afloat last season, but hasn't found the secret sauce for overcoming Watson's poor play. Well, the secret sauce may be spreading it out and getting away from the heavy personnel. I mean, you have to match play with the personnel. So, and I've been critical of that. Again, I think it's low. Jim Schwartz was the coordinator of the year. He's regarded as a really good offensive coordinator. Stefanski's won Coach of the Year 2 times in his 4 seasons. You can say whatever you want about those awards, but ranking them 13th behind guys who have had success for 1 year, I got a little bit of a head scratch there.
I think they're very similar to the team you named at 10 in the Minnesota Vikings. Look, you've got an elite play caller as your head coach on offense and a very experienced defensive coordinator. You guys have Jim Schwartz, and the Vikings have Brian Flores. Very, very similar, not similar schemes, but very similar amounts of experience, right? And just dealing with veteran players, young players, all sorts of things. And they're clearly plus defensive coordinators. I think Stefanski, that part about, oh, well, he made the best of a bad situation. Well, there's not a ton of coaches that can do that. You look at, there was a lot of teams last year who had disasters at quarterback, whether it's injuries or ineffectiveness or all of that. And the only two that made the postseason really were the Browns and the Steelers, right? And the Browns won 11 games. If you told the Browns you're going to start P.J. Walker and Joe Flacco for a lot of this season and still win 11 games, that's a miracle, honestly. And I think it's a huge credit to Stefanski's play calling, right? They don't have the deepest receiving core in the league. You had the Nick Chubb injury. You had all the quarterback issues. You had all the offensive tackle issues. There's a lot of teams in the league that would have taken that same offense and won 5 or 6 games. I think Stefanski's one of the best play callers in the league, honestly. I think that's probably a top 10 coaching staff, at least equal with that Minnesota staff, who I think is a very similar staff.
Dalton Wasserman, PFF data analyst, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear from Bryant McFadden, former NFL player, what he thinks about the Browns' projected win total of 8.5. That's straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, dough, Skrilla, chips, bread, and mo. 2, 5, 10, and 20. 30 big ones, games aplenty. Cheddar, butter, loot, and scratch. Find the letters, make a match, cause there's many words for cash, no doubt, and many ways to play cash word. Check 'em out. Cash word from Ohio, lottery. It's game time, yo. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions and prizes, don't you know?
We continue talking Browns with Dalton Wasserman, PFF data analyst, also co-host of the PFF College Football Show. Bryant McFadden, former defensive back in the NFL, if he would take the over or under on the Browns win total, which is 8.5. This from CBS Sports HQ.
Take the over. 8.5 is extremely low for a very, very talented team on either side of the football field. I echo your concerns, John, when you talk about Deshaun Watson. But the Cleveland Browns, they're the one team in the National Football League where they don't really rely on their quarterback as much. Heck, if you look at their success a year ago, that proves my point. This is a team that is overly balanced where they don't need outstanding play from the quarterback. So I'm taking the over. And one of the big reasons why I'm taking the over is because of their schedule. Look at their first 5 ball games. They got Jacksonville, Dallas at home, travel to Jacksonville. You got the Giants, you got the Raiders, you got the Commanders. When you look at the first five ball games, I easily see 4-1. 4-1. And if you look at the rest of the schedule, winnable ball games where they will be the clear-cut favorites going into those ball games as we see it right now. Against the Chargers, against the Saints, against the Broncos. And then within divisional play, they're going to split ball games against maybe Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh based on the history of these divisional teams.
Dalton, that's one of the most logical schedule game breakdowns that you're going to hear. The danger with doing that at this time of the year, you got to tell me who's going to play quarterback in those games. That's the main thing. Injuries play a huge part every year.
Absolutely, and it played a huge part for the Browns, and they persevered through. And I think, honestly, I'm tempted to take the over, also over 8.5. It seems like a reasonable total, and they won 11 last year with a lot of difficulty. It really depends on Deshaun Watson, right? When you talk about, like, what guy are we getting here, right? Because in the AFC, there's a boatload of elite quarterbacks, right? Mahomes and Allen and Stroud and Herbert and Lamar and everybody. And I don't think a lot of people think of Watson in that category anymore. So they are at a disadvantage there. But the two things that would concern me when picking the over on this win total, one, he mentioned the beginning of the schedule, but I think the back half of the schedule will concern me. The last 5 games, you talk about Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Cincinnati, Miami, and Baltimore. That's as hard a last 5 as you could get. Last year when they were playing with Joe Flacco, they got to play against teams like the Bears and the Jets, who clearly they were better than at that point in the year, right? The other one would be, to me, there is a clear split in performance for this team between their home and road games. It's actually, last year was one of the best home field advantages in football. I believe they went 8-1 during the regular season. Their defense was spectacular. It was a hard place to go into and win, but they didn't look nearly as good on the road. And 4 of their first 6 games are on the road. I want to see this team and their defense especially travel on these road games and not give up. I believe they gave up almost, was it 30 points a game on the road? It was some high total that you wouldn't think it would be. They need to play better on the road before we really start talking about them being in the elite class in the AFC.
Yeah, no, that is fair, without question. All right, this is from Pro Football Network, 2024 offensive line rankings. They have the Lions 1, the Eagles 2, and the Browns checking in at number 3. And Browns fans are kind of cringing at this because the line play has not been great, but the starters have played 2% of the snaps total thus far in the preseason. We haven't seen Jedrick Wills, hasn't practiced, haven't seen Jack Conklin, he's been out moving around. Teller, Posick, and Bitonio have not played. That Dalton, I said this early, I'm concerned about the line, and only from this standpoint. Offensive line, the lines just don't ace gracefully in the NFL. It's you're really good, and then there's a drop-off, and it's like a cliff, and it's because these guys are beating the crap out of each other every play for, 80 plays.
Yeah, and it can so often come down to offensive line health. Usually every year there's only 1 or 2 teams that has their front 5 play every single game, right? You need both health. Hopefully you're lucky with the health of your offensive line, and you have depth guys. And I think, honestly, last year a guy like DeJuan Jones came in and played really well when he was healthy as well. So that helps. I think the floor is high with the Browns, that they're at least a top 5 or 6 unit, very much like the Chiefs, because they have an elite interior 3, right? Bitonio and Teller and Posick, that's as good as it gets on the inside. So at least that part is stable. If Jack Conklin's healthy, we know he's really, really good. The left tackle thing, that is a question mark. It is. That's a position that's a big question mark for them. Jedrick Wills just hasn't been healthy enough and have not good enough to give them what he's needed to give them so far in his career. But when you talk about you have 3 of the 4 spots locked down, and then you have a 4th one in Jack Conklin, if he's healthy, there's a lot of teams that don't have that. I think their line is in a pretty similar boat as Kansas City when you talk about the interior being the rock there.
Yeah, again, it's fair. I'm just concerned just because Bitonio's up there in age. Teller, the way he plays. I mean, when you play that physical, eventually it takes a toll, and those things kind of build on each other, and it all comes due at once. This is from Pro Football Network. Every NFL team's best red zone target. Browns, they go Amari Cooper. 2 candidates lead the Browns in red zone targets last year. Njoku topped Amari 27-20. The year before it was Cooper 33-26. Numbers are close, 53-53. It's truly a toss-up between the two. I would imagine, because of just David Njoku's a physical freak, I would imagine he's probably going to be the preferred red zone target. Amari Cooper is a guy that, for whatever reason, he just goes up, puts out 1,000-yard receiving season, so he's going to have 7, 8, 9 touchdowns. Isn't going to say anything, isn't going to do anything other than help you win. I think he gets overlooked because he's not a diva.
No, absolutely. And look, for as many teams as Amari Cooper has been on, he's one of the most underappreciated receivers in the league and one of the most consistent receivers in the league, right? He's the one guy in this Browns passing game that we know what we're going to get out of him, right? And look, as far as the red zone thing, targets are great, but you still have to be effective with them. And the Browns as a whole, and this is the part where I think the quarterback rotation and everything that was going on last year really hurt them. We have them in the bottom 5 last season in the red zone in offensive grade, passing grade, and receiving grade. There was just not much about their entire passing game that worked last year in the red zone. And part of that, when you have inexperienced quarterbacks, when you have, Joe Flacco coming off his couch to play, when you have Dorian Thompson-Robinson taking reps, guys like that, it's tough to gain that rapport because there's quarterbacks that say the red zone is actually the hardest part of our job, right? So, look, Cooper's a good target. He's obviously a great route runner down there. Njoku is a big-time target because of his size, but they just need better execution in the red zone as a team.
All right, this is from The Herd with Colin Cowherd. AFC North predictions from Colin Cowherd.
AFC North, I don't know if there's a great team. I'm out on the Steelers. Browns ownership quarterback scares me. It's Ravens, Bengals. I may revisit this. I'm going to go, listen, Lamar Jackson's health. I trust him to be healthy by week 17, even though he's had injuries more than Joe Burrow. But if Joe Burrow is upright for the entire season, Cincinnati may win this division.
Any 4 of those teams may win the division. The one thing that I would say, it's a brutal division. So the fact that you have to play in the division 6 times, put the Chiefs in there, and let's see what they do with that kind of thing as well. And again, the Chiefs are clearly the class of the AFC. Anybody that argues that's not being realistic, I think they benefit because they get a couple of games against the Raiders, couple of games against the Chargers, couple of games against the Broncos. So it works against the teams in the division that all 4 of them are decent teams and physical teams.
Absolutely. And look, didn't we heard this for 20 years about Tom Brady and the Patriots, right? Just mowing down the AFC East all those years. And look, they earned that right by being that much better than all those other teams, right? But no, I think the AFC North, I think it's the best division in football. I do. I think the NFC West is also really good. The NFC North is good. But I think this Browns division, Browns, Steelers, Ravens, Bengals, this is the best division in football. And you just have 4 really good football teams. If Joe Burrow's healthy, the Bengals are a serious threat. We know what the Ravens can do. Pittsburgh, they just find ways to have winning seasons and make the playoffs despite whatever their quarterback situation is, right? But in those predictions, I would probably flip Cleveland and Pittsburgh. The Steelers' offensive line is really young, and they seem to be struggling a bit at quarterback despite having Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. It's preseason, though, so we'll see where they go. I'd probably flip those 2, but it's the best division in football, I think, top to bottom, and I think it's the most competitive.
Yeah, and I don't think you could argue with anybody's rationale between the Ravens, Bengals, Browns, maybe even the Steelers to win that division. There are things that you could say, I think this, and this are going to happen, and this team's going to win the North. So I can't argue with, if you want to say the Bengals are going to win, okay. You want to say the Ravens are going to win? All right. Before I let you go, preseason power rankings, who's on the hot seat for every NFL team? This is from ESPN. They go Chiefs 1, Ravens 2, 49ers 3. They got the Packers at 10, Cowboys at 11, and the Browns at 12, which would put them in the playoffs. Who is on the hot seat? They say Jedrick Wills Jr. enters contract year, returning from a torn MCL, limited him to 8 games in 2023. He needs to show he not only is healthy out there, but he's the long-term answer as a blindside protector. That's fair. I think they're a little surprised that he hasn't been able to go yet. They worked out day before yesterday. They had Jack Conklin, and they flipped him and were having him do left tackle type takeoff drills. He hasn't been working out, but there's some writing on the wall that they thought he was going to be back. Everybody comes back at a different pace. And all 3 of their tackles, their top 3, are coming back from knee injuries.
Yeah, it's rough, and it's the biggest question for the team. And honestly, when you look at Jedrick Wills as a former first-round pick, it's hard to let it go, right, when it's a first-round pick. But he really is on the hot seat. And even when the front 5 are all reasonably healthy, he's still the weakest link of that 5, right? And you really need him on that blind side to protect Deshaun Watson, right? We need Watson to have a clean pocket in order to operate too. And it's something he didn't have too often, even back to his Houston days, right? That's when you want to see a guy succeed, is when, there's not people at his feet or not people hitting him in his rib cage when he's trying to throw. Look, it's very reasonable to think that if the Browns struggle in pass protection and they struggle at offensive tackle, that's what they're going to go looking for in next year's draft. There's another good tackle class coming, and I don't think they should hesitate if they feel like that's the biggest weakness on their offense, because there's still more guaranteed money on that Watson contract. He's going to be there. But no, I think it makes a lot of sense with Wills, especially as a former first round, I believe a top 10 pick. That's a guy, obviously a lot of pressure, and the injuries, it's unfortunate, obviously, with all of them, but they have to figure it out. Look, the good teams in this league can block, right? The Ravens can block, or at least they're another one. They lost 3 starters up front, but usually they can block. The Bengals are still trying to figure it out. The Steelers are trying to figure it out, and that may be an X factor in this division. Who does have the best offensive line and the healthiest offensive line by the end of it?
Yeah, without question. And to your point, I think Wills was 10th overall, so that even is another factor with people's follows Joe Thomas, 10th overall pick. We always have a good left tackle, and it just hasn't happened for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a lot of pressure having to take over for an all-timer like Joe Thomas, right? But we've seen it. I mean, other teams, even in that draft, I think about the Jets with Mekhi Becton had to finally cut ties for the same reasons, injuries and ineffectiveness. And eventually you have to find another solution. So this year is a huge year for Wills to really establish, one more chance to establish himself as a starter, as an impact player, and establish that draft status that he deserved it.
Dalton Wasserman, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Dalton.
Appreciate you having me on, as always.
Dalton Wasserman, PFF data analyst. He is also the co-host of the PFF College Football Show. Make sure you check him out. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here Monday at 4 o'clock, where we will be talking about the Browns and Seahawks preseason finale. Have a great night, great weekend. See you Monday at 4 on Sports for CLE.